Tom Hogan, the coordinator of the Milwaukie Poetry Series. I want to welcome you to this sixth and final reading of our shortened 14th season. Thank you so much for being here. We know that there are a lot of other things that you could be doing, and so we appreciate you being with us tonight. We have a great treat for you. Emmett Wheatfall is here, and I'm going to introduce him in just a minute. But before I do that, I just want to say that I hope you're all safe and well in this pandemic that we've been in, and you made it through the heat okay. We are going to be starting our 15th season. I said this is the end of the 14th season. Our 15th season is going to start the second Wednesday in September, which is September 8th. And we're going to be going through next year. Our readings are going to continue virtually for the time being. And then we will phase in at some point during the season to in-person readings and be able to move to the library, which we would love to do. We'll have to see when that's going to be able to happen with the city and the library guidelines that they have to follow. But thank you again for being with us tonight. I want to make some thanks because there are a lot of people to thank. Firstly, the city of Milwaukie, which has been supportive of us really from the beginning. Secondly is the Letting Library of Milwaukie. And we are a committee of the Letting Library, and the Letting Library has been very supportive of us. So we appreciate that. Thirdly is the Milwaukie Poetry Series Committee. And as you know, and as I say, that you don't have something happening unless you have a group of people working on it. So we appreciate the effort that people have put in over this time to be part of the Milwaukie Poetry Series and making this all happen. Finally, we want to thank Willamette Falls Media and Josh Reynolds, who is our technical guru and makes all of this transmission happen. So thank you to all of those people. Now, the treat that we have for you tonight. Our poet this evening is Emmett Wheatfall. Emmett is a published poet, playwright, and recording artist. He has 2 books of poetry published by Fernwood Press, an imprint of Barclay Press. They are As Clean as a Bone and Our Scarlet Blue Wounds. His newest work, With Extreme Prejudice, is scheduled for publishing late summer 2021. Lyrically, Emmett has released 1 non-music poetry CD and 4 lyric poetry CDs. He is known nationally and internationally for his poetry, having received wonderful reviews. For more biographical information, visit, and his website is listed. Books are going to be available for Emmett, and there will be opportunities to buy them at the end of the reading, and that will be up on the screen. We are going to have a question and answer period, a short Q&A period after the reading, but before that, let's all join me in welcoming our poet for this evening, Emmett Wheatfall.
Good evening, Tom and Jane. What a delight and a privilege and an honor to be a featured poet in the 14th season of the Milwaukie Poetry Series. I want to tell you tonight that I've known of and participated in the Milwaukie Poetry Series for a number of years. I'm of the opinion it is one of the finest poetry series led by you, Tom, in the state of Oregon, and I believe that there are a number of poets who would affirm that as well. So just want to thank you for your years of diligence in bringing poetry to not only the Milwaukie community, but to the state of Oregon as well. I esteem it a privilege and an honor to be here tonight to share poetry. As you indicated, I will be releasing a new collection, a new work of poetry. And the new work is titled With Extreme Prejudice. And I want to make sure that people understand tonight that the title of the work has nothing to do about race relations. The works in With Extreme Prejudice has to do with COVID-19. You know, when you get into a pandemic, and a lot of us don't have an opportunity generally in our lifetimes to experience a pandemic, but we are in one now. And when you have time like that, when you're sheltering in, especially when you're a writer, it affords you quite a bit of time to reflect and think on things. And I've often said that poets, in my opinion, are what I call the secular prophets in society. When people no longer want to listen to our religious leaders and our political leaders, if you look throughout the centuries and in different parts of the world and different cultures, when there was times of struggle, it was the voice of the poets, the troubadours, the bards. And so with this particular work, I titled it With Extreme Prejudice. And just quickly, with extreme prejudice really comes from terminology that's often equated with the military, wherein they would say terminate with extreme prejudice. That means that whatever you need to do to subdue the enemy, to put them out of action, whatever it takes to do that, you have the authority to prosecute that with extreme prejudice. It has nothing to do with race. But as we're in this pandemic, COVID-19 is prosecuting with extreme prejudice. It doesn't care about what age you are, whether you're young or old, it doesn't matter. It doesn't worry about your nationality, your race, your gender, your sexual, none of that matters. It is prosecuting with extreme prejudice, and many of us know, and maybe know of loved ones who've either contracted COVID-19. There are those who've been debilitated by it, or those that have passed on from it. And thank goodness now that we do have some vaccines that are staving off the effect of COVID-19. So what I'd like to do this evening is just share with you a number of poems. Some of the poems, some of them are dark, but the work deals with life, death, pain, struggle, and despair. And I think at this particular time in the pandemic, it would be really good for us to think of those things. The first poem I want to share with you this evening is a poem that gets us to think about COVID-19 in the context of our mortality and our ability to continue living. And oftentimes it got us thinking that if we contracted and if the inevitable happened for some reason, what is there beyond the great beyond? And so the poem is titled Before the End of Day. Before the End of Day. And in the poem, it references daybirds. And I want you to think of daybirds as a metaphor or analogous for people. Before the end of day. Before the end of day comes, advancing the question, where have all the daybirds gone? Moreover, where have all the victims of COVID-19 gone? More and more daybirds flee to somewhere. More and more victims of COVID-19 descend somewhere. Somewhere beyond the end of day. I wonder if someday I will make my way somewhere. Somewhere beyond the end of day. More and more, I am sure I will go and never return. If anyone returns before I go, please let me know before the end of day. Poem entitled Before the End of Day. I want to share with you often to this time during pandemic, there's been maybe early on a real sense of despair. Without the development of the vaccines, I think there was a real despair had gripped the world and gripped our country. And but I think that we were comforted by the healthcare workers, the essential workers, those particular folks that cared for us in hospitals and cared for us in retirement homes and convalescent homes, those that cared for loved ones in their own home, those folks who are not the wealthy of our society or have much. And we really need to be thankful for the essential worker and for the healthcare worker, because oftentimes they've stood in the shadows. A poem called Beyond the Shadows. Beyond the Shadows. Under an avalanche of despair, family members find themselves. Who is willing to care other than we, the nation's healthcare workers? We know despair, and despair knows us. We tell ourselves we need to stay vigilant and to cast off our collective fear. We are not donuts dipped in hot coffee, offering no said complaint. We are not Pinocchios with wooden noses, hyperextended as if lying. What is to be said of this? Frequent visitor named Despair, who shows up unannounced. Despair should knock upon arrival, reveal itself in the dimly lit foreground, way beyond the shadows of moonlit nights. Light a candle in our honor. Shake a big stick at COVID-19. A rooster need not crow like a circus barker to get our attention. Not a choir or ensemble member is needed to slap a tambourine to restore the earthiness of our joy. Where is your hope, my friends? Where is our redemption in this era of COVID-19? One of my favorite poets is the late great Charles Bukowski. And many in poetry, especially those probably in academia poetry and stuff like that, were really critical of Bukowski's work. But, you know, your work, if it's of value, if it speaks to people, it will work. And Charles Bukowski was a very beloved poet, a very gruff, very rough poet in his poetry, but he was loved. And I love reading Charles Bukowski's work. So what do you do in the midst of a pandemic? Well, a lot of people are finding time to think about new careers, new vocations, changing the field of work that they're in. People are working on developing their talents. I myself have had a great love for the piano. I know Jane is a pianist, and so during the pandemic, I've been taking time and just brushing up on my piano skills and having a great time with that. But more so than anything, I've been writing during the pandemic, and I've been working on my creativity. So I thought I'd play with Charles Bukowski just a little bit in a little short poem I call Charles Bukowski Might Say. Charles Bukowski might say, who would write a poem right now while sheltering in place? Every goddamn poet I know. Something poet Charles Bukowski might say. And he's been long since dead now. Damn it, I'm writing one right now. Gee, COVID-19. I would read that again, but the language is a little bit too strong. But I had to put those kind of words in because that would be an insult to Charles Bukowski if I didn't interject one of those expletives. But if you get a chance to read Charles Bukowski's work, you'll be doing yourself a great favor. with extreme prejudice. That's what COVID-19 continues to do. We're actually dealing with variants now. I think it's what's called a Delta variant, a more aggressive and extremely lethal version of COVID-19. And what COVID-19 has done to me, and it's amazing that I was working on this early on in the pandemic, it makes us think about our mortality. And, you know, COVID-19 has reminded us that for all of our advancements since our formation, since our creation, since our existence in this world, we tend to think sometimes that we're invincible. And there are times when things like the swine flu and, you know, and a time of cholera and those major diseases, it kind of reminds us that we're vulnerable, that we're not invincible, that we as human beings are fragile, and that our lives are measured and marked in time. So we need to think about death and dying in the midst of COVID-19. So this poem is called Dying in the Shadow of Pandemic. Dying in the Shadow of Pandemic. Dying in the shadow of pandemic and the plight of coronavirus is like missing cartilage in the human knee. Humanity aches for mobility. We are bowed right now. We are reeds bending in the wind. Who thought we could be humbled? Brought to our collective knees, sustained only by the possibilities of modern medicine and the self-sacrifice of professional healers. Some look to the cross, others to thoughts and prayers, many to the probability of chance. Humanity should lower her nose a little, expel breath from her bosom, inflating her sense of pride. Recognize how there are things in this world that take the shine off the crown. Later than sooner, humanity will rise to stand again, lest she forget earthly humility and seize the day. Dying in the shadow of pandemic. Obviously, as a poet, I've been thinking about these things. When I was working on these poems, and these were coming to me over an expanse of time, I was just thinking about how we've been impacted economically, how we've been impacted socially. Economics, countries have been really hurt by this, even in our country. Our government has issued stimulus checks to be able to help people make ends meet, issued dollars whereby single mothers and single parents can be able to provide daycare for their children. People are working at home. It's been a real struggle. And there have been many people who've suffered because of this financially, yet there's been a few of us who've become extremely wealthy as a result of COVID-19. I won't name any names. I think most people know those trucks that stop by your house and drop stuff off. Somebody is profiting from that explosion in that field. I won't call any names. A poem titled Freddie's Stimulus Check. Freddie's stimulus check. In this, the days of COVID-19, the Smiths cannot pay their rent. A lawn service mows my lawn. Freddie has not received his stimulus check. I will periodically reallocate my investments. A homeless family is not eaten. Karen and I are eating 3 times a day. Sandra is sheltering at home alone. My family communicates daily. An acquaintance is fearful and nervous. I admonish her to be safe, smart, and vigilant. A dear friend telephoned me this morning. I awoke intent on telephoning him. People are asking, where is God? My gospel song continues to get airplay. Confidence in elected officials is waning. Humanity needs faith, hope, and love. All over the world, people are dying. And yet, I'm alive here in Portland, Oregon. And I feel guilty. Freddie's stimulus check. Freddie's stimulus check. One of the great writers of all time was Hemingway. And I had the distinct privilege of reading a biography of Hemingway, about Hemingway. And I was just fascinated by this man as a writer. And one of the things I recall when I was reading his biography, many people don't know this, but the biographer said that he was such a prolific writer and a reader. He would take, I believe it was like number 2 type pencils with lead and an eraser on the end, and he would wear down 7 of those pencils in a day. Can you imagine 7 number 2 pencils with lead and use those? We're not talking about keying, typing. We're talking about freehand writing and wear down 7 pencils. And there's a thing in literature called deconstructionism. And I think to a degree Hemingway applied that. He probably wrote prolific volumes, voluminous amounts of writing. But what he did was he went back and he edited and edited and edited until he came up with the great works that he is noted for. So I thought about Hemingway's imagination. So I incorporated Hemingway in a poem I want to share with you that's called Hemingway Would Have Taken Me Fishing. He was an avid fisher, loved to fish. Hemingway would have taken me fishing. Is the end of my wit my driveway? It will be if I don't let go of this steering column. Is this how an overweight lemon branch feels? Dangling with tongue-tingling tanginess? My body leans forward like a tree blown in the wind. If only I had been Ernest Hemingway's friend. Hemingway would have taken me fishing. Not giving a damn, we would have drank his best liquor. That is what I imagine. For the death of me, climbing steps to my front door, the Great Wall of China, preferable. It would represent something newly engaged. If only I had not come of age, wherefore I would lose myself in Hardy Boy mysteries, even a Nancy Drew mystery or 2. Those days have rolled out to sea, driven by the silver moon's dictates. I would dance a soft shoe for duct tape. Is there anything better to hold together discordant thoughts of an unfurling wit? Take to viewing this evening news. Another report about COVID-19. Should I? Hemingway would have taken me fishing. I think I would have loved to have fished with Fish with Hemingway. You know, I think when we first started out with this virus, COVID-19, I think the hope and the aspiration was that we would come up with, a vaccine. But I don't think in the beginning many of us thought that it would mutate, that there would be variants of it. That I think early on we kind of thought that once the vaccine came out and those particular people who want to be inoculated will get inoculated, that would kind of put this thing to rest. And, over the last couple of months, we've been hearing about these mutations and these variations and stuff like that, and how dangerous they are. And, I think back on the other viruses too. We have been told for decades that we would probably experience another pandemic. I think even Bill Gates was one of the leading people that talked about that. So I wrote a poem about that. And here's how that goes. The poem is called I Will. I Will. COVID-19 is saying, I will take from you your sunshine as well as your rain, the freedom that is your liberty, the livelihood that keeps you and yours living. Eventually, the moments you deny others will belong to someone else. Even retail stores, motels, and hotels, corporate offices, and commercial property, as well as your homes, cabins, beach houses, your children's education at college, universities and academic institutions, your local, regional, and national sporting events, public and private gatherings, your way of life, your social networking, forms of government, economic prowess. And Tom, when the beer on tap runs dry, you will then find a vaccine and reminisce about the life you once knew. I feel myself tearing up, I'm sorry. Just know the following. A new form of COVID-19 will come. And it will say, I will take. I will take. I just want to encourage folks, if you have not vaccinated, I would like to take this opportunity to encourage you to do that. I don't think anybody should order you to do it. That's your conscience and what you should do. But when you look at the alternative, for me, I know I had surgery on my right eye last year. When I came out of surgery, I had a tough time breathing. And I kept telling my wife, I can't get enough oxygen. I can't get enough air. And I think what happens is that our lungs are like broccoli. And the anesthesia fills up in your lungs. And after you come out of that anesthesia, you got to get that out of your lungs. But I felt like I was sucking air through a straw. And when I read and saw how people struggle and labor with their breathing, and I remembered how I struggled trying to suck air through a straw. When I looked at the option, do I want to breathe or do I want to suck air through a straw? Personally, my own conviction, I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just simply saying I elected to actually be vaccinated. But that's your call, but I would like to encourage you to do it for yourself, do it for your family, do it for your community, do it for your friends. We look back in history and we look at the world wars. There's the American Revolution, there's been Civil War. We look at, World War I, II, the Iraq conflict, Vietnam, Korea. We could just go through and continue to list them. We've constantly been at war. But I think one of the greatest wars that we're fighting right now is this COVID-19 war. And it is prosecuting with extreme prejudice. And like I said in the beginning, it doesn't care what your race is, your gender, your sexual orientation, your disability. It doesn't care what nation, jingoism or xenophobia, any of the kinds of things, it doesn't care about that. It's like the old adage I used to hear folks say when I was younger, there's a man going around taking names. But I have a poem called Not Another World War. Not another physical world war. I'm hoping and praying that we as human beings would stop our warring, and put our weapons down and figure out how we can live together in peace. We need to fight COVID-19 together. Everybody needs to be called to task to help to put this to rest. Not another world war. Jane, not another world war. I have an epigraph. An epigraph is a little quote at the beginning of a poem. If you look at it on page, there'll be a little quote before you actually read the poem. And I want to quote Winston Churchill this evening, the great Winston Churchill. He said this: never give in, never give in. Never, 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 in nothing, great or small, large or petty. Never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense. The legendary, the great Winston Churchill. Here's the poem. If COVID-19 is another world war, some people will not outlive their bunker. In this war, sheltering in place is most noble. Many will endure, others grumble, but we must never forget there is no such thing as collateral damage. Therefore, a casualty of this war, your neighbor may become. Look to the cross. Look to the Red Cross. Look to your neighbor across the street. Look out for your neighbors lining the street. Go to him. Go to her. Go to them. For if there is any humanity in you, help him, her, and them. Possess God-like regard for the children of this war. And you, the wise, consider your elders and let benevolence validate your empathy. Be safe. Be smart. Be fierce. Be vigilant and sober. For here now is the COVID-19 world war. It's all over the world. In every nation under the sun. We need to be vigilant. Be safe. Need to look out for our neighbor, our friends, our family, our community. What does pandemic look like poetically? Thought about that too. As I said earlier, I believe, and it's just my little statement, it's the way I look at things, I believe that poets are the secular prophets in our world. We are able to look at things analogously, metaphorically. And we're able to put them in a context, hopefully, that translates well to people's imagination. If the poems are good, they speak to people's heart. Poem titled Pandemic. Pandemic. Non-existent before emboldened conception, out of a dank darkness to life you spring. Unheralded your seminal arrival, except for that first snatching away of breath that announced your birth. The yellow sun, the crescent moon, twinkling celestial stars, spoke not a word. Wild winds, torrential rain, provincial fires remain mute. Our universe remains strangely silent. The Creator, our absent curator, swaddled in the invisible, you come, COVID-19. To the expanse, you fling yourself, hitching a ride like a vagabond. Neither man nor woman are you. For humanity came not one summons, not a single writ. You have seized upon our existence, the author of unsanctioned liberty, cloaked as the essence of Grim Reaper, initiating this era of reaping and sowing, like a man going around taking names. For the field of humanity is fertile, your virility impregnating. You will never be our panacea. Some describe you as epidemic. There is more to you than epidemic. Pandemic. Yes, pandemic. Whereby you seize upon old oak trees touched by disease that no longer bloom nor bear blossoms. Inconsistent among adolescents, merciful to the tender shoot. There are insufficient tests. In your cunning, you test us. We, the people of this world, must place our neighbor before ourselves, the elderly being our image and destiny, self-corned when ordered, actualize our desire to survive, to secure the future of our posterity, for we will prevail. We must. It's just a delight reading these poems. I think I have time for one more?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Please.
Just let me know a couple more, I think, be able to get them in real quick. One of the most, the story will be told about the nation of Italy, the country of Italy, how they responded in the early days of the virus when they were sheltering in place and they were quarantined. And they went out on their rooftops and out on their porches and they took pots and pans and they beat them together and they began to sing the way that Italians would do. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but I was so inspired. The world was inspired by what the Italians did. So as a poet, I had to write about it. And I did. And it's a poem I've titled Sing Like Italy. Sing like Italy. Spring is coming. Songbirds will return to trees. Smoke will rise from barbecue pits. Sunday school will welcome back children. Saturday markets will bustle with customers. So will songs about the Savior sung by church choirs. Eventually, the vagabond will die. Seniors will rejoice in mercy that is grace. Some will visit grave sites of the less fortunate. Sally will again hang washcloths on clotheslines. Sam will return to his rickety rocking chair. Sisters will sob in their mother's arms, and sons will man up and hug their fathers. In the skyline rests our lives until our deliverance comes, Tom. Let us gaze unselfishly at essential workers and sing like Italy. Let's see. No, I don't think I'll do it. Just one more, if that's okay. Two more? Okay, quickly. And just thank you for inviting me. This has been refreshing. There's a movie out called Waiting to Exhale, and I always say when we poets get a chance to read our poem, and at least have an audience, we get a chance to exhale. So this evening, I'm exhaling these poetic inspirations. The president did not conscript you. The president did not conscript you, nor did the United States military recruit you. No terrorist placed a gun to your head and made you. Not a known or unknown militia coerced you. Essential worker, our nation's citizen soldier, dedicated warrior, bold, brave, fierce. You, essential worker, hold the line. You stem the tide of tidal wave in this, the COVID-19 world war. This is not the fictional clone war, Jane. This is the real clone war. Such a stealthy enemy who multiplies and survives, who lays low and reaches high, taking the last of breath away from the elderly in nursing homes every day. A lot of healthy men and women having experienced life's beginning, only to die long before their natural ending, ravishing communities as if predestined for doom. Forget not the loss of babies coming soon. One more. Let's see what would be really, really appropriate. Great poem to end on. I like blue jays. Just something about blue. Tom knows we were talking about the color blue for this particular event. But blue jays. Will the blue jay change color? Will the blue jay change color? At the behest of Scourge, fallen to his death upon a bed of green grass, his temporal resting place, will the blue jay change color? Over time, he will, as will some human beings, if the bed of grass where they lay last is not cordoned off and a stone set forth in memoriam, whereupon inscribed is a name, date of birth, date of death, never the reason being a death from COVID-19 with extreme prejudice.
Emmett,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yes.
And I know we're virtual, but you have to imagine and listen to the applause.
Oh, okay.
Listen to the applause coming from the people that have been watching
Oh, thank you.
what you shared with us tonight.
Thank you. Yes.
Just some of the things that I noted. Poets are the secular prophets.
Mhm.
Beyond the great beyond.
Mhm.
Where have all the daybirds gone?
I love that.
An abundance, an avalanche of despair.
Mhm.
The earthiness of joy. Humanity aches for mobility. Humanity aches for mobility.
Mhm.
Tongue-tingling tenderness.
That was I was praying I'd get that right. I was hopeful
You did
I'd
a
get
good
that right.
job.
Tongue-tingling tenderness.
It will say, I will take.
That's right.
It is prosecuting with extreme prejudice.
No mercy.
Many will not outlive their bunker.
That's right.
Hitch a ride like a vagabond.
Mhm.
The essence of grim reaper. Will the blue jay change color? So, thank you for a very, very rich reading tonight. We appreciate it. We've got a couple of questions.
Okay.
We'll do some question and answer. And I'm going to invite anyone who would like to ask Emmett a question to put it in the chat, and I will try to pull things out of the chat. I'm going to start, and I'm going to ask Emmett Who are you reading now?
I have not actually been reading any particular poet in volume, but the last poet's work I read was William Butler Yeats and his piece that's called The Rose of Peace. I was commissioned to write a poem for a peace and nonviolence organization here in the Portland area that they wanted, and they commissioned me to do it, and I've wrote it. And it's titled Of Peace and Nonviolence. And so his work, Yeats, what can I say? Just the opportunity to read his work and draw from his work is pretty powerful. Over the last couple of years, I've been looking at James Baldwin. You know, James Baldwin, the great black intellectual, late great black intellectual. And I've been doing a lot of reading in a lot of other areas around history and stuff like that. But Yeats is who I looked at.
Yes. Well, I know you referenced several writers. Charles Bukowski, Hemingway.
Oh, don't get me started.
Well, here's something from Carolyn Martin.
Oh, okay.
She says, "What a lovely evening for a poetry event." And I didn't know this either, but from Pauline, I didn't know the NBA Finals were on tonight.
Oh, well.
But she said, "So glad Emmett and you all give up the NBA Finals to read poetry."
Yeah.
Annie Lightheart says, "Thank you."
Oh, gracious. I consider one of my teachers.
Huh.
Annie Lightheart, I consider
Yeah.
one of my, she's a fabulous teacher of poetry.
Well, talking about authors, who would you say influenced you?
Oh, mercy, you know who I'm going to call. The Renaissance man, Langston Hughes. He spoke a lot about to the despair of racial injustice, social injustice. He wrote about the plight of the Negro, which I am. So it was a great opportunity to look in the mirror, per se. You've probably heard me joke before. I write about everything. Most times people look at African American or Black American poets and think we're writing about race all the time. No, I write about everything. I write about an Irish boy in love with Irish girls who pulls up dirt out of the ground, an O'Malley. I write about a Chinese emperor. I just have probably a couple thousand poems, but I write across the expanse. But when I need to really see me, I looked at Langston Hughes, and he was a fabulous, and he did lyrical poetry too. He did poetry to music, which is something that I do. I have, a number of albums out that I've done. So Langston Hughes, I have to give him his props. Me and Pauline love Lucille Clifton.
Yeah. Well, I know you're really familiar with Langston Hughes.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to see if Jane has a question that she particularly wants to ask. And
Well, I'd like to know how you got started writing poetry. What was the atmosphere, or was there an event, or how did it just start flowing out of you, which it is flowing out of you?
Well, if I want to answer your question, if you make me a promise,
Okay.
one day I'm going to write a poem, and I want you to dance to that poem.
I'll
You
do it.
music,
I'll do
you
it.
dance, interpretive dance, and I read the poem. So it's one of the goals I have. Just very quickly, I've always been creative. I loved theater in high school. I wanted to be an actor. My father said, "No, I'm not going to pay for that. You're going to take accounting." So I went ahead and went to college, and I didn't major in accounting, but left college and married. But how I got started in poetry, a friend of mine at work, not at Clackamas County, when I was working for Portland General Electric, it was her husband's 60th birthday. And I did voiceover and different stuff for PG and other things. Would you read his poem that I wrote for him? Now, I know nothing about poetry, but I knew that poem was not very well written. So I asked her, could I rewrite it? And I made her a promise that on the night of his birthday celebration, I will read her version, and then I will read mine. Would that be okay? She said, okay. So there's a late great Janis Scroggins, the great pianist, jazz, blues, incredible. She was a friend of mine, and I asked her, I said, I would love to put this poem to music. And she said, sure. So we went in the studio, and I will never forget it, Jane. I was reciting the poem, and I saw the sound technician bobbing his head. And he looked at me and he smiled. And I was smitten. And after that, I went and started studying poetry. It's not acceptable to me to just write a line and turn it and make it look like a poem. There's a whole academic rudiment to poetry. And it's like learning how to read sheet music. You know, it's one thing to be able to play by ear, but it's another thing when you can read the notes, which you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And so as a result of that, I began to read, and I have a quick little story for you. I can't call his name, but he's a major poet in Canada. And I had written 4 or 5 poems, and I saw on the internet he wrote a piece on a rebuttal about spoken word. And quickly I wrote him. And I said, I'm new to poetry, would you take a look at my work? And take a look at my work. And he wrote me back 3 days later. I was shocked.
Wow.
And he said, I won't critique your poetry, but here are 4 poetry books. Hoagland, Oliver, couple of other, these were books on the rudiments, and I did that. And the rest is history. I'm a student of poetry.
Huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Talking about music, that brings up a question. How do you decide which of your poems to put to music or use music behind them?
Well, you know, sometimes they're written for music,
Uh-huh.
even without the music. Iambic pentameter, you know, Shakespeare wrote, whatever, let's say 10 syllables per line, a lot of his work that way. A lot of that you can do in 4/4 time. You know, I was quoting Her Father Loved Me, Often Invited Me. You can actually put that in like 4/4 time, and it works. So sometimes you can write, and most music uses in rhymes. You look at most music today, they don't sing from A to Z. They sing A, B, or A, B. So you could do that. So that's kind of easy to do. But what I have learned and mastered is I go from A to Z. So there's no hook. I don't often don't do a repeat. I have to actually say that all the way through. And I'm a bird on a wire, because if I don't say it right or I get out of time, it's going to become noticeable. So my Welcome Home album is one in which I took words and I had somebody write the music, and we went to the studio, and I just recite from A to Z, no repetition really. And I love doing it. I guess it's a gift and talent I have.
Yeah,
So,
okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Another thing from the chat, Ann Farley says,
My friend, yeah.
Emmett, you are a singular prophet in our society. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that.
So I've got one final question. And after I do that, Emmett's going to end with a poem to end our reading tonight. And I came prepared to ask you about Our Scarlet Blue Wounds. And what was the hardest thing for you about finishing that book? But since you've got a new manuscript here, if you want to talk about that in terms of With Extreme Prejudice, whichever one you'd like.
I think I'll talk about Our Scarlet Blue, just mention that.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's the finest. Well, there's a competition between the two books, as clean as a bone in that one. But I think that's really outstanding. The hardest part about that, well, let me say both those books. Of course, I'm writing about race, but about blackness. And I want people to understand that these books are not me pointing my finger in people's chests and saying, you're bad. Those books are an opportunity for the reader to put on a lens and actually see my world in some regards through a lens without being accused of being this or that or vilified or whatever. But if we would look through each other's lens, we might see and appreciate each other. And I've had people tell me this. One person, I sat down in my parlor and I read it, and it was eye-opening. Just the other day, someone told me that they sat down and took them about 4 hours, but they went through 4. I don't know why it took 4 hours, but they went through 4 books, 4 hours in both those books, and it was really enlightening for them. It was a white person, white female that did that. So that feels good.
Yeah.
That's what I'm about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Great. Thank you. So you have
I do.
a concluding poem for us?
Just a short poem, just a short poem. And I want to give you a little background on it. I happen to be on Facebook, probably too much. And there's a Facebook friend I've never met. And her name is Britton Minor. And one day, Britton sent me a Facebook message, and she said, Emmett, have you heard or have you listened to Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah? And she sent me a YouTube link to it. And I was mesmerized by the beauty of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. Of course, I wrote about it.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the poem. And I titled it Britton Minor. I wish just the two of us could sit on the edge of the earth, our legs dangling and feet dangling freely, the sun setting in the distant horizon as that mesmerizing version of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah plays in the background while we pray for peace on earth and goodwill to all humanity. Britton Minor, I dream of this. Your friend, Emmett.
Emmett, thank you so much. What a rich reading. What a wonderful evening. Thank you for being here with us. It's been a delight, a joy. We will see you on September 8th with our next reading. Thank you for being with us tonight for the Milwaukie Poetry Series. I'm Tom Hogan. Good evening.